The streets of Surulere were still damp from last night's heavy rain. A soft mist clung to the air, and Lagos had not yet fully woken up. Emma Davis, 23, made her way down the cracked sidewalk in her worn-out blue uniform. She moved with quiet urgency, her nylon bag swinging slightly with each step. Inside, 2 slices of bread and a sachet of water, her breakfast. In her other hand, a pair of old cleaning gloves. Her shoes flapped as she walked, the soles nearly giving way. But she didn't slow down. Her job at Crownville Towers wasn't going to wait. Just as she neared the main road, a loud engine cut through the quiet. A sleek white SUV roared toward her, hitting a deep puddle at full speed. In one awful second, muddy water splashed up and drenched her from head to toe. Her clothes clung to her breakfast bag fell to the ground, and her hair, carefully tied up that morning, was now dripping and stuck to her face. She gasped and stepped back in shock. The SUV didn't stop. Instead, the tinted window rolled down just enough for a woman in oversized sunglasses and red lipstick to peer out. "Watch where you stand next time," she called with a sneer before speeding off. Emma stood there, soaked and speechless. Her lips trembled, her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She simply picked up her ruined bag and kept walking. Across the street, parked discreetly in a black car, a man named Ethan Cole watched the whole thing, his jaw clenched. He recognized the woman Vanessa Johnson, fashion mogul's daughter. What she didn't know was someone powerful had just seen her trample someone who didn't deserve it. By the time Emma arrived at the side entrance of Crownville Towers, she looked like she had walked through a storm. Her once clean uniform now had brown streaks all over it. Water dripped from her hair and sleeves, and her shoes squished noisily with each step. She entered quietly, trying not to draw attention. But Mr. Clark, her supervisor, stood waiting near the janitor's closet. "You're late," he barked. Then, frowning deeper, he added, "And what is this mess?" Emma tried to explain. "A car splashed me, sir. I cleaned up as best I could, but—" "No excuses," he snapped. "The event wing needs to be spotless before the board members arrive. Get to work." She nodded, holding back the sting of humiliation, and walked into the closet to change. Her backup uniform was a faded green one, hanging loosely on her frame. She tied her hair back again, picked up her mop, and got to work. Meanwhile, downtown in a tall glass tower, Ethan Cole sat in his office watching the rain fade into sunlight. He wasn't just wealthy, he was one of Lagos's youngest CEOs, the kind of man who could change lives with a phone call. His assistant entered, handing him the file he requested. Emma Davis, age 23, 2 cleaning jobs, lives in West Pine, caretaker of her 10-year-old sister, Olivia. Mother passed away 2 years ago. Ethan stared at the photo in the file, Emma and a little girl smiling softly. "She didn't deserve what happened," he murmured. "Should I do something?" the assistant asked. "Not yet," Ethan said. "Let's see who she is." Vanessa Johnson stood before a wall-sized mirror in her Lecky Phase 1 penthouse, her gold necklace catching the soft light pouring through floor-length windows. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from stylists, PR agents, and fans praising her latest fashion post. She adjusted her sunglasses and sipped a green smoothie, completely unfazed by the memory of splashing the cleaner girl earlier. "She was too close to the road," Vanessa muttered. "Honestly, she should be grateful I didn't drive over her foot." Her assistant Casey stood by awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Vanessa lived in a world of curated perfection, chauffeured cars, luxury events, and zero tolerance for anything unfiltered. She believed in status, in superiority, in being the woman everyone else envied. "Some people are born background characters," she added with a smug smile, scrolling through comments on her latest post. She barely remembered the girl's face, just the look of shock and mud. That had been entertaining. Meanwhile, across town, Emma was bent over the ballroom floor, scrubbing mud and shoe prints from imported tiles. Her back ached, her stomach was empty, but her motions were precise and focused. Guests passed nearby, their polished shoes echoing across marble floors. No one acknowledged her, and she didn't expect them to. She whispered a quiet prayer. Just get through today. At lunch, she slipped out behind the hotel and sat on a crate, unwrapping her small meal of bread and water. Her fingers trembled from exhaustion. She had just taken a bite when a man passed the entrance, dressed casually, cap low, sunglasses shielding his eyes. "Ethan," he paused, phone in hand but never looking away. He watched how she protected her food from dust, checked her phone like she was waiting for someone. His chest tightened. She reminds me of my mother, he thought. Strong, unseen, but still standing. The next morning, Emma woke early. The one-room apartment in West Palm was still dim, filled with the soft breathing of her younger sister, Olivia. Emma quietly warmed water over their small stove and set out a school uniform that was a little too tight but freshly ironed. She tied Olivia's shoelaces and handed her a packed lunch. "Be good today," she said, brushing a kiss on her forehead. "You too, Emmy," Olivia replied with a sleepy grin. That smile gave Emma enough energy to face another long day. She arrived at Crownville Towers still wearing her backup uniform. The blue one was soaking in a plastic bucket at home, stained beyond recognition. Her body was sore, her mind tired, but she didn't expect anything different. Until she opened her locker. Inside was a small brown paper bag. Confused, she peeked inside. A brand new pair of gloves, a still warm sandwich wrapped in foil, and a folded note that read, "For the girl who works with grace, even when the world is unkind." Emma blinked hard. She looked around the locker room, but no one made eye contact. No one hinted that they knew anything. She sat down, opened the sandwich, and took a slow bite. It was fresh, warm, delicious. She hadn't had a hot breakfast in weeks. For a few minutes, her shoulders softened. She felt seen. Far away in his office, Ethan watched from the hotel's internal security system, a feed his company legally maintained through a security partnership. He saw her smile, saw her pause, and nodded to himself. "Small steps," he whispered. Across town, Vanessa laughed on a talk show set, flaunting her newest designer handbag, while demanding a new assistant be fired for serving her lukewarm coffee. But behind those sunglasses, her mask was beginning to crack. That evening, Ethan picked up his phone again. "I want her promoted," he told the hotel's regional manager. "Find a way, quietly." There was a pause. "Sir, she's just a cleaner." Ethan's voice dropped, firm and absolute. "She's not just anything." Across the city, Emma was in the lobby, sweeping near the grand columns, when her supervisor, Mr. Clark, called her over. "Emma Davis," he said, scanning his clipboard. She straightened up. "You're being moved to VIP floor maintenance, starting tomorrow. Better pay. Less mess." Emma blinked, stunned. I didn't apply. It's approved. Congratulations," he said before walking away. As she walked back to the janitor's closet, whispers followed her. "VIP floor," someone muttered. "For her?" another scoffed. "She must know someone." Emma heard it all, but said nothing. She changed out of her uniform in silence, folding her backup tunic with care. That night, she shared the news with Olivia, who hugged her tightly. "See? I told you good things happen," the little girl beamed. Emma smiled, holding back tears. She didn't know why life was shifting, but deep down, a quiet part of her felt maybe this time she was being lifted, not tested. Ethan started visiting Crownville more often, always discreet, always observing. He saw the way Emma polished every corner like it was sacred, how she greeted every guest with grace, even those who ignored her, even those who mocked her. He admired her deeply, but hadn't spoken to her properly yet. That same night across town, Vanessa received an unmarked envelope at her office. Inside, a photo, grainy but clear. Her car, Emma, the splash, a note scribbled on sticky paper. "Not everyone forgets." Vanessa's hand trembled as she tore it up, but for the first time in years, she felt it, a tightening in her chest, a chill in her power, the beginning of something she couldn't control. The next morning, Emma stepped onto the VIP floor for the first time. The air smelled different, like polished wood and imported lilies. The lighting was warm, the walls decorated with gold-accented frames. She moved carefully, keeping her head down, her steps light. She polished mirrors, dusted corners, and cleaned quietly, every movement precise. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced. She felt like a guest in someone else's dream. From behind a newspaper in the lounge, Ethan watched her work. Dressed in simple clothes, khakis, and a polo, sunglasses perched on his collar, he looked like any other guest. But his eyes were steady, following her movements. He saw how she greeted each passerby, even when ignored, how she carefully tucked a flower back into a vase someone had knocked out of place. She worked like someone who believed the little things mattered. After a while, he stood up and approached her. "Excuse me," he said gently. "Do you know where the Sky Lounge is?" Emma turned, startled, but offered a polite smile. "Yes, sir, I can walk you there." As they walked, he asked, "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 2 years," she replied. "It's been hard, but it pays the bills." He paused. "Do you enjoy it?" She glanced at him, thoughtful. "I don't think anyone dreams of mopping floors, but I'm thankful. I try to do my best." Ethan looked at her closely. "You do more than that. You shine." Emma gave a shy laugh. "Thanks, I think." She had no idea who he was, and Ethan didn't tell her, not yet. He wasn't ready to break the moment's honesty. That same evening, Vanessa sat across from her father at a private restaurant on Victoria Island. The lights were low, the table pristine, but her mood was boiling. "Someone's targeting me," she snapped, swirling her untouched wine. "First that photo, now people online saying I'm heartless." Her father, George Johnson, remained calm as he stirred his tea. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "someone's just holding up a mirror." Vanessa stiffened. "Please, I haven't done anything wrong." But a part of her knew better. She had grown used to power without consequences. She had walked over people, spoken down to them, and believed her name would shield her. Now she was trending for all the wrong reasons, and her curated image was starting to fracture. Her father's silence spoke louder than any lecture. Meanwhile, Emma returned to her locker and found another note. "Keep shining. The world sees you, even if others pretend not to." There was no name, just those words and a single white flower tucked inside her glove. She didn't know who was leaving these gifts, but each one felt like a quiet reminder that she wasn't invisible. Still, not everyone was pleased. Some of the staff gave her cold stares. One cleaner, Tina, had worked there for 6 years and wasn't thrilled about Emma's sudden promotion. "She must be doing something behind the scenes," Tina hissed. "No one moves up that fast." Emma noticed the change in atmosphere, the sudden silence when she entered, the narrowed eyes. But she said nothing. She just kept doing her job, the same way she always had with excellence. The tension built quietly until it snapped. The next morning, a guest slipped and fell in the VIP lobby. Panic erupted. "Who cleaned here last?" the floor manager shouted. The answer came quickly. Emma. She was pulled into the office, her face pale, hands shaking. "I swear," she said, "I used the right solution. I checked the label twice." But no one listened. Her voice cracked. She had worked so hard to prove herself, and now this? Ethan heard the news within minutes. He didn't call. He didn't text. He showed up in person and requested the CCTV footage. The staff hesitated. He insisted. The footage told a different story. It showed Tina, jealous and bitter, sneaking into the supply closet and switching Emma's cleaning liquid with a slippery alternative. When the footage ended, silence filled the room. The manager turned to Emma, his expression softening. "You're cleared. I'm sorry." Emma left the office in tears, not angry, just exhausted. She had done nothing wrong, but it still hurt. From across the hallway, Ethan watched her quietly, his jaw tense. "She doesn't even know I saved her," he thought. "But I will. One day." That night, in a different part of Lagos, Vanessa scrolled through her social media and froze. There it was, a blurry image of her SUV splashing water onto Emma, with the caption, "Some people think money erases manners." The post had gone viral. Her face wasn't visible, but people were starting to put two and two together. "Who's spreading this nonsense?" she hissed at Casey, her assistant. Casey hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe. You should apologize." Vanessa scoffed. "To a street cleaner?" But this time her voice lacked conviction. The hotel's atmosphere shifted after the incident. Staff members who once ignored Emma now greeted her with warm nods. Some offered kind words. Tina was suspended for 2 weeks, and though Emma held no grudge, she kept her distance. That afternoon, while arranging flowers in the lobby, she felt a familiar presence behind her. "You again," she said with a small smile, turning to find Ethan. "You really like this hotel." "I like seeing things grow," he replied. His tone was different this time, slightly more personal. Emma tilted her head. "You're not just a guest, are you?" He chuckled, then extended his hand. "Ethan Cole. I'm part of the group that owns Crownville." Her eyes widened. "You're the Ethan Cole?" "Just Ethan," he said gently. "And I've been watching. Not in a creepy way," he added quickly. Emma laughed, nervously but sincerely. "I saw what happened that day," he said softly. "The car, the mud, and how you kept walking." Her smile faded slightly. "You didn't deserve that, and I haven't forgotten it." Emma looked at him, unsure what to say. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan added. "Just know, I see you." That night, as Emma walked home through quiet, dim streets, her heart wasn't racing with fear or stress. It was hope. For the first time in a long time, someone powerful had seen her and treated her like she mattered. Emma couldn't sleep that night. Ethan Cole, Lagos's youngest billionaire and the man behind half the hotels in Victoria Island, had spoken to her not like a CEO, but like human, like a friend. He had seen her, not her job title, and it left her shaken in the best way. Part of her wanted to believe this kindness was real, but another part, formed by years of disappointment, feared it might vanish like all good things had before. The next morning, while Emma was walking to Crownville Towers, a white car slowed beside her. Her breath caught. It was Vanessa. The tinted window rolled down, and a familiar voice drifted out. "You're Emma, right?" Emma stepped back slightly. "Yes," Vanessa smirked. "You've caused quite the stir. Suddenly, everyone thinks I'm the villain and you're the saint." Emma furrowed her brows. "I never said anything about you." "You didn't have to," Vanessa said, tilting her sunglasses. "Playing the victim works wonders. Just be careful. Ethan's rich, not righteous. He'll get bored." With that, she sped off, leaving behind more words than mud. At work, Emma tried to shake off the encounter. She poured herself into her duties, cleaning the Sky Lounge with extra care. During her break, she was called to the cafe on the VIP floor. Ethan sat at a table with a folder in front of him. "What's this?" she asked. "A scholarship," he replied. "Full hospitality training, paid for. Starts next month. You'd still work part-time if you like." Emma's hands trembled. "Why me?" Ethan leaned forward. "Because you never asked for anything, but you deserve everything." She stared at the folder. Vanessa had tried to plant doubt in her mind, but here was Ethan not offering pity, but possibility. That evening, Emma found herself on the hotel's rooftop garden. The city lights sparkled below, but it was the letter in her hands that glowed in her heart. A scholarship, a future, something she never dared to dream about. She thought of her late mother and all the nights she went to bed hungry, praying just for a break. And now, that break had come not through luck, but through grace, endurance, and quiet strength. Ethan joined her, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. "You're quiet," he said, handing her one. "I'm overwhelmed," she replied. "Is this really happening?" He nodded. "You earned this, Emma. Every bit of it." She looked up at him. "I used to think people like you didn't see people like me." Ethan leaned on the railing beside her. "I didn't always. But watching you reminded me of my own mom. She raised me alone. Worked as a cleaner, too. Never asked for anything. But she built everything." Emma blinked, stunned. "You never talk about her?" "Because people expect me to act like I built myself. But women like you, you're the ones who build the world." The next day, during Crownville's monthly staff meeting, the manager made an announcement. Emma Davis had received a full scholarship through the company's education initiative. A small applause followed, growing louder until even the waiters and front desk staff clapped. Emma's face flushed with quiet joy. Her co-workers stood a little taller around her. Not all of them, but enough. Meanwhile, miles away, Vanessa stormed into her father's office. Why is everyone obsessed with her? She snapped. She's just a cleaner. Her father looked at her over his glasses and replied flatly, she's someone who earned her place. Maybe when you learn humility, you'll understand that. Later that evening, Ethan offered to walk Emma home. The road to West Pine was narrow, lit only by scattered bulbs and street vendors packing up for the night. But somehow the silence between them felt warm, not awkward. They talked about books, Lagos traffic, music, and Olivia, Emma's little sister, who had unknowingly inspired every sacrifice Emma had ever made. They laughed gently. There was no rush, no pretense, just two people walking beside each other. So, as they reached her building, the front door creaked open. Olivia ran out in her oversized pajamas. "Emmy!" she shouted, hugging her sister tight. Then, noticing Ethan, she tilted her head. "Is he your friend?" Ethan knelt slightly, smiled. "Hi, Olivia. I've heard a lot about you." Emma smiled softly, wrapping her arm around her sister. "She's my everything," she said. Ethan's eyes lingered on both of them. Two women, young and younger, facing life with dignity and grit. It stirred something deep in him. As Olivia ran back inside, Emma turned to Ethan at the gate. "This all started because someone splashed mud on me," she said, half laughing, half in awe. Ethan smiled, eyes crinkling. "And maybe it ends with something beautiful." Emma looked at him, her heart racing. "Maybe. It's just beginning." The moment hung between them like a held breath. The city moved around them, generators humming, distant horns blaring. But neither of them moved, because sometimes real beginnings don't arrive with fireworks. They arrive in quiet, steady steps. And that night, Emma took her first one, not alone but seen. Emma's story began to spread quietly, first in whispers among staff, then as a feature in a local lifestyle blog. From Mud to Merit, How a Cleaner Inspired a Billionaire. The article included no scandal, no embellishment, just facts told with warmth. It went viral overnight. Comments poured in. "This is what real grace looks like. She's the true Cinderella of Lagos. We need more Ethans and Emmas in this world." At the hotel, Emma carried herself with quiet pride. Her steps remained humble, but sure. She had started evening hospitality classes and was already excelling. Lecturers praised her work ethic, and her classmates admired her. The same people who once ignored her now listened when she spoke. At Crownville, managers began asking her opinion during staff meetings. She was no longer invisible. She was necessary, respected. But not everyone celebrated her rise. Vanessa, seething, paid a shady blogger to run a fake expose. The post claimed Emma was romantically involved with Ethan for money and had plotted her rise from the start. It spread like wildfire. Emma saw it during lunch. Her hands went cold. Whispers began again in the break room. Some of the same people who clapped now looked away. Shamed and hurt, she quietly packed her things and left early that day. But Ethan wasn't about to stay silent this time. The next morning, Ethan Cole called a press conference, his first in nearly a year. The room was packed with journalists, microphones, and flashing cameras. Dressed in a simple gray blazer, he stepped to the podium with calm fire in his eyes. "Emma Davis," he began, "is not a gold digger. She's not a social climber. She is the most honest, hardworking person I've met." A gasp moved through the crowd. If people believe otherwise, they need to examine what they value, money or heart. The clip aired on national news by nightfall. Comments exploded with support. "Protect this girl at all costs." "Ethan Cole, you're a real one." "Emma deserves the world." Meanwhile, Emma sat on her small couch in West Pine, her sister asleep beside her, watching the press conference with a hand over her mouth. Her eyes welled with tears. No one had ever stood up for her so publicly before. That evening, a delivery arrived at her door, a single red rose and a handwritten note. "Let the world whisper. I'll always speak your truth. E." Emma pressed the card to her chest. The scholarship, the promotion, the public support. It wasn't just a dream. It was her new life. And for the first time, she let herself believe she deserved it. Not because someone powerful said so, but because she had earned every step through fire, silence, and dignity. 1 year later, Crownville Towers hosted its 20th anniversary gala in the same grand ballroom Emma used to mop at dawn. The chandeliers sparkled, violins played softly, and Lagos's elite arrived in glittering gowns and tuxedos. But the moment Emma walked in, the room hushed. She wore a simple, sky blue gown, no diamonds, no designer label. But her grace turned every head. She wasn't a cleaner tonight. She was the guest of honor. Ethan stood beside her, pride in every line of his face. He hadn't proposed yet, but it was clear to everyone watching that his heart belonged to her. When Emma was called to the stage, the room erupted in applause. The hotel director handed her a plaque that read, "For strength, humility, and the spirit that lifted us all." She stepped to the microphone, eyes steady. "A year ago," she began, "I was just a girl in worn-out shoes with mud on my uniform. I was invisible until one act of cruelty and one act of kindness changed my life." She looked at Ethan. "I don't stand here because of luck. I stand here because I kept walking, because someone believed in me before I could believe in myself." The crowd stood. Some wiped away tears. Even the backroom staff in uniform clapped proudly. Later that night, Emma returned to the spot where it all began, the road where Vanessa had splashed her. It had since been repaved. She slipped off her heels and stepped barefoot across it. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked gently. Emma smiled. "Leaving behind who I was, stepping into who I've become." Without a word, Ethan took off his shoes and joined her. Barefoot, side by side, they walked forward, not just as a couple, but as proof that even when life throws mud, flowers can bloom, and sometimes the world stops to watch. The end. What did you think of Grace's powerful journey from a moment of humiliation to a life transformed by resilience and kindness? Share your thoughts. In the comments, did this story move you? Would you have reacted the same way in her shoes? If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional, uplifting tales that prove even the smallest acts can spark the biggest changes.